Hi guys, back again. I decided that I wanted to make this a little bit more dynamic. And in this video, I'm pretty much going to add the ability to look at things either per 48 minutes or per game, because I think that that would be a beneficial thing to learn, how to do dependent drop-down lists and add metrics and things like that. So I'm going to go back to my data set, which is here. Remember, we're pulling the data from basketballreference.com. They're very kind people for giving us access to that data. So I want to add variables, and I want them to be per game and per 48 minutes. I'm going to show you how to do those calculations. For people that are used to Google Sheets and Excel and just performing calculations in general, probably relatively simple. Right now I'm just adding columns. I'm just selecting columns, right-clicking, inserting more to give me room to add the columns that I want, because we're going to calculate the values in these columns that we're adding. So I just inserted a bunch, and I'm going to manually type in what I want, or what I want the column headers to be. And for me, when I'm looking at per game values, I guess minutes played per game might be okay, and per game is going to be /G. That's how I'm going to classify things. FG per G, FGA per G, and I'm going to leave columns for the percentages, even though we don't calculate them, and I'll show you why in a little bit. So I'm going to leave a blank column for FG percent, then 3P, 3P per G, 3PA per G. I'll leave a blank one for 3-point percentage, 2P per G, 2PA per G, and I'll leave a blank one for 2-point percentage. Now I gotta look FT, and then there's one EFG. I'll leave another blank there, and AO. And then we got FT and FTA, FTG, FTAG. Then we'll leave another blank for free throw percentage. And then we go through the rebounding, so ORB, DRB, TRB. And what else do we have per game? Assists, steals, blocks, turnovers. And I'll skip personal fouls because I don't really care about them personally. You can add them. So assists per G, steal, block, turnover. Steal per G, block per G, TOB, G, and then a blank for personal fouls, and then points per G. I think that's all that we have there. Yep, and the order looks right. So now we're going to perform our first calculation. It's super simple. Pretty much, we just go equals in here. That's the sign in Google Sheets where you're going to perform a calculation or refer to another cell. The first thing that we're looking at, minutes played. So minutes played divided by games in the G column. Now I'm going to click enter. So this person, Steven Adams, 26.7 minutes per game. And what we're going to do here to make us, because we're going to drag this across, we don't want to do this a million times. So I'm going to lock in the column F by putting a $sign in front of it. What that does is if I drag this formula across, it'll keep the games column constant, and it'll move across all these columns here so that I can just populate all the fields that I added already. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to put in an if error function. And what that's saying is if there's an error with this calculation, what do you want to do? Comma. Well, if there's an error with that calculation, I just want it to be blank, which is double quotes. And I'll close a parenthesis and click enter. So then if there happens to be an error, and we know that we have fields in here that are like, what if I scroll down a bit? Let me see if I can find one. We have another like rank, player, position, age, this thing. That's just because that's how it is on the site. And we don't want calculations going in there if we're going to do like team or position averages or whatnot. So I'm going to drag this across now that we have our calculation all good, all the way to the points per game. And this would be personal fouls a game. These would be percentages. And this looks about right. So I'm not going to confirm it. It looks okay. If it's wrong, then it's wrong. We can change it. But Now let's do the per 48 minutes. So the way that I'm going to do that, I think this is the quickest way to do it, is I'm going to grab all these columns here that I've already made, copy them, and paste them next to the ones that have been already created. And I'm going to do a find and replace with a /G to /48. That'll let me know that it's per 48 minutes. So I think that's in, where is that? Edit, find and replace. I want to find /G, and I want to replace that with /48. And it's in the specific range that I have selected. It does that kind of automatically. I don't want to change anything, so I'll say replace all. I'll click done, and now we can see all of these are per 48 minutes. And I don't need minutes played for 48 minutes because that just doesn't make sense. So I'll delete it, and we'll start with FG per 48. So now let's just do this again from scratch, another calculation. So we're going to go equals, and what are we going to do? We're going to divide FG divided by minutes played times 48. So that would give us field goals per minute, and then multiplied by 48 is per 48 minutes. I'll click. Okay, I think that's how. Is that how? Or is it per 36? I don't remember. Maybe it's 36. I'll do 36, and I'll change all these actually right now because I think that they do it in per 36. But anyways, you edit, find, replace per 48 with per 36, and let's replace all those. Okay, so this is per 36 minutes. And again, I don't know if that's right. Let me undo that. So now that we have this calculation, we are going to do the same thing that we did before, where we're going to lock in the minutes column so that it doesn't move when we drag it, which is H. So I'm going to put a $sign there. And now I'm also going to put parentheses here just to make sure that the calculation is working as I would expect it to. And I'll add in that if error at the beginning also. Say if error, if there's an error with this calculation, comma, let's make it blank. And I'll close a parenthesis and click enter. And now I will drag this across. So I would say Steven Adams has 19.5 points per 48 minutes played. And now the next step that we're going to do is I'm just going to delete all the columns that we don't need. So I left those in so that when we drag it across, the fields populate correctly. Now I'm just going to hold down the control key and click on a bunch of columns that don't have headers because they're percentage columns, or they're columns that I said that I didn't care about. And I'm just scrolling along, selecting all of them, holding down my control key and doing it. You can do it one at a time too. And then I'm going to right click and go to delete selected columns. Again, I'm working on a PC. It might be a little bit different on a Mac, but now we have all of our columns, and I'm going to select all the values that we just created for this one player and go to the bottom right of my selection where I see these crosshairs, and you could drag it all the way down to the bottom, but if you just double click, at least for me on the PC, it'll populate everyone's values. And I'm going to stay here exactly where I am with everything selected and where I just double clicked. And for me, this is a good hotkey at least. If I hold down Control and Shift and I click the down arrow, it's going to select everything in these columns. And that's what I want to do because I want to change the format. There are too many decimals for me. So I'm going to hold down Control and Shift and click the down arrow. And notice it. Now we're on row 678, so it selected all my stuff. And I'm just going to remove decimal points by clicking this button up here until I have 1. Let's say 1 decimal point is fine for these values. And now we have per 48 minutes and per game values for each player. And this won't affect the import process, like unless the table changes in Basketball Reference, which we'll have to know about. These calculations should not be affected. So now that we have the data, we want to use it. And I'm going to go into my dashboard, and to use it, first I'm going to unmerge these cells, where if I can find, I think it's edit, I never remember, format, merge cells, I'm going to unmerge them, and team metric, I'm going to move all this stuff here down 2 slots, and I'm going to copy the metric and the PTS here, copy that, and I'm going to paste it right above, and I'm just going to change this to be metric type. Let's just say right now this looks ugly and it's doesn't make sense and it won't work, but that's okay because we're just these are just placeholders. This is going to be where we select the type of metric that we want, and then this list will be the metrics that fit into that category, and then we'll be able to see them on our graph. And we need to go through a couple of steps to do that first, and I'm going to go to the lists. I did this in a pretty lazy way with this transpose. It's fine. It'll give me all my metrics in our data set. And actually, if we notice, I'll scroll down and notice how the per game and the per 48, all that stuff is added because of the way that we did this. But let's change this. Let's customize this because some of these things don't make sense to look at. So I'm going to call this total. I'll call it, no, because it has to, we're going to use named ranges and we need to name them in a certain way. For now, I'll show you what I mean, but let's go total, and then let's go per game, and let's go per 48. These are not going to be the actual names that we see, but we can have them as placeholders for now. And now let's just copy the values that we want to be in those. So we created all these per game columns. I'm going to copy all of them, come up here, and I'll just paste the values. So now these are not automatically this is not an automatically updating list anymore. You're controlling it by the column names. These names have to match the columns up here in our data set. And you're controlling which of those column names are in here, which you'll be able to pick from. So here are our per game values. Let's go to the per 48 values. I'll copy those, and I'll paste them right here. Paste special, paste values only. And then in this, I'm gonna let's see, I'm going to take, I don't want player, I don't need ranks, doesn't mean anything, don't need position, age, I don't need team, but let's just copy all these here, and I'm just going to paste the values here. And now this is not an automatically updating list anymore. You can also control the order that these show up in. I'm not changing it right now, and I'm going to remove the thing. Oh, age is okay. I can keep age. But we don't need team. And I think that's about it. So then we can just move these up. So now we have total values, per game values, and per 48 values that we might want to look at. And the next step is to create named ranges of this information. So I'm going to select this and go down just in case we have more values. I'm going to go to, I think it's insert, where is it in? Data, named ranges, and I'm going to define a named range. And all this is saying is I'm giving a name to these cells. So I'm going to call this stat, I'm going to call this total stats. I don't know, this might change, but I'm going to click done. And one thing about name ranges is that there can't be spaces or anything like that. So you got to think of a way to do it. I use an underscore to separate words. So I'm gonna grab all this. I'm gonna go to data, or I can just go here, add a range with my selection, and let's go per game. Maybe I'll just capitalize everything to make it consistent. Per game, like that. And then I'll do the same thing here, just select a bunch just in case we have more metrics. Per 48. And I'll just call this total instead. So these named ranges that we name these things have to match what's up here for this to work in the way that I'm doing it, because it's the easiest way to do it. So I'm going to do per underscore game, per underscore 48. And now the next step is creating a drop down for these. And we've actually already done this in our dash, we've created drop downs before, and we're just going to do the same thing. So in our metric type, we don't want it to be this list. We want it to be a list of the types of metrics that we can pick from, which will then be filtered down into this list. So I'm going to go to data validation, and I'm going to change this range that we're picking from here. I'm going to go to my lists, and I'm going to select these three, or that range, and click OK, click Save, go back to my, where we go, the dash, and now our metric types are these three, total, per game, per 48. And this chart is still driven off of this, so it still works with these metrics, but now we're going to use this list to filter down into this list. And in this list area, we're going to do something, we're going to use a function called indirect, which will take everything beneath whichever the column is that we select in that area. So I'm just going to do it over here so no one sees it. I'll say equals indirect, and I want the cell reference to be what I select, not anything up here, but what I actually select in my dashboard, which will be this cell here. And what we'll see is a list of the values in that column show up, I hope. So I'll click enter, and maybe I'll just say equals here as the header, equals this, so that we know what we've selected. So for the per 48, here are all the values, that's what we've selected. And if I go into my dash and I select something else, total for example, go back to my list, now everything in our total column will show up. And now we can just do the same thing that we did before with data validation. So I'm going to go here, go to my dash, go to my metric, and right now it's still focused on that, on our group that isn't adjusted by this metric type, and we're just going to change that. So we're going to go to data validation. Instead of looking at this range for the list, we're going to look at the list that we've just created that is filtered down from what we select in our dashboard. So let's select this list now and click OK and click Save. And now if we go back to our dashboard, I mean, these metrics are already there, but let's say that we go to a different type, like per game. And what we'll initially see, because both these things don't change at once, is that the metric that we have selected, game started, is a total metric. So a red arrow pops up, but when we click on the arrow, it filters down to the per game metrics. And what's going to happen with this graph is it's going to break, and there's a reason for that. So if I select FGA per G, it's not going to work. And the reason why is because we selected a certain range in our filtered areas that in our data set, they're looking at column headers from A to AD. We just need to expand that range holistically all the way out to BK. There are a couple ways to do it. The one is you can go into each one manually. Like for example, if I go into this team filtered area, you'll see A to AD. I could switch all of them to BK, but we pretty much know holistically that all the ADs need to be changed to BKs. So now we're going to do a find and replace for everything that is AD with the $sign, and we'll replace it with BK because that's our new range. Hopefully this works. There's still a couple of other things, or one other thing that we have to do, but let's try it out. So $sign AD with $sign BK. Remember, the alternative is to go through one by one and manipulate each formula that we've written. So let's try this. AD, BK, all sheets. We want to search within formulas, and we're going to replace all. Click OK. Click Done. That didn't work the way that I wanted it to because some of the ADs don't have $signs, which I should have done at the beginning. But I noticed it here, so there's one AD here. Maybe we'll try another AD no, because that might replace player names too. So let's just go BK here. And let's see if there's anything else where there's a AD. Not sure why that's CQ. BK, BK, and let me just look in here, make sure that there are no other ADs. Perfect. Now the last thing that we have to do to make this work is we need to, before we did an equal sign to our column name in the NBA 2020, and if we just drag this across, I think we should just get the rest of the columns. We'll see what happens. And they're there. We all go all the way to the points for 48. And now let's see if this worked. And it does. And go to our dashboard. And now we have minutes per game. That was pretty quick. I didn't expect it to be that seamless. But anyways, now let's re-merge this. So we'll go to, I think it's in, what is it, in format. Merge all. And now we have that icon back. And now when we're on per game, we can see field goals per game or assists per game. And all this stuff should still work. The switcher will work, should be able to switch teams. If we select per 48, let's just check that. Let's see, 2 points per 48. It looks like everything's working fine. And our title still changes to reflect what we're looking at. Wow, that Chicago. I could have gotten maybe a couple of better icons. Maybe I insert. I'm nitpicky about this stuff. You might have seen that I made some aesthetic changes. I just added a row, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna resize the row to I don't know, something like 10. Give this a little bit of space. So I might do that here too. Resize row to 10, and sorry, I'm going to remove the borders here. So we'll go through a little bit of other functionality. This is where the borders are. I'll remove the borders, and I will redo that big box border around the area that I just committed to this space. I need to make the line, making the line color that, make the line thick. And now I should have a new space for that logo. I'll just add in that gray so it's consistent. And maybe I'll drag down my chart a little bit. So now, yeah, we should still be able to switch teams and all that stuff. And that's all I got. Maybe in another video, I'll go into I'll build off of this and make an individual player analysis also, maybe down beneath here where you can select a player and look at information about them. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this, and if you like it, I'll keep going. If not, then at least I think it's cool. Thanks for watching.